You've probably had this thought or heard someone else say it. Cancer feels like a distinctly modern disease, something tied to processed food, pollution, plastics, screens, all the trappings of contemporary life. And when you look at the numbers, that instinct doesn't seem crazy. Cancer rates today are dramatically higher than anything historical records seem to suggest. Archaeologists digging through thousands of ancient skeletons, spanning tens of thousands of years, have found remarkably few confirmed cases of cancer in the bone record, not zero, but strikingly suspiciously rare. So is cancer really a disease we invented? The honest answer is more complicated and more interesting than a simple yes. Asterisk, let's start with what researchers have actually found, because the data itself is genuinely startling. A widely cited 2010 study published in Nature Reviews Cancer, led by researchers including Michael Zimmerman and Rosalie David, reviewed the archaeological and paleopathological literature and found only a small handful of convincingly documented cancer cases across the entire ancient Egyptian mummy record, despite extensive study of hundreds of remains over more than a century. Similarly, broader surveys of ancient skeletal remains across multiple continents and time periods have consistently found cancer-related bone lesions to be a rare finding compared to what you'd statistically expect given modern cancer rates. That gap is the entire mystery. If cancer is simply an ancient, unavoidable feature of biology, why does it barely show up in tens of thousands of years of preserved human remains? Now, here's the part nobody talks about. A huge chunk of this mystery has a much less dramatic explanation. Most ancient people simply didn't live long enough to get it. Cancer risk increases sharply with age because it's fundamentally a disease of accumulated cellular damage and mutation over time. Researchers estimate average ancient life expectancy at birth was often in the 30s, heavily dragged down by high infant and childhood mortality, meaning even people who survived childhood frequently didn't live into the age ranges where most modern cancers actually develop. Epidemiological data consistently shows cancer incidence rising steeply after age 50 and continuing to climb from there. If most of a population never reaches that window, you'd expect far fewer cancer cases showing up in their remains, regardless of anything else going on. This alone explains a significant portion of the gap. But it doesn't explain all of it, because some ancient individuals clearly did live into their 60s, 70s, even older. And cancer still shows up far less than you'd expect, even accounting for that. Here's where it gets strange, because there's a serious detection problem hiding underneath all of this. Asterisk, certain types of cancer actually leave visible marks on bone, and even then, only in specific circumstances. Soft tissue cancers, including many of the most common modern cancers like lung, breast, and colon cancer, frequently don't metastasize to bone in a way that survives thousands of years of decomposition, meaning the archaeological record is structurally blind to a huge percentage of cancer types entirely. Research published in the International Journal of Paleopathology has specifically noted this detection bias, pointing out that paleopathologists can really only reliably identify cancers that spread to or originate in bone tissue, missing the vast majority of cancer types that exist. In other words, we're not looking at a complete record of ancient cancer at all. We're looking at a tiny, specific slice of it. The rare cases that happen to leave physical evidence durable enough to survive millennia, out of a much larger category we simply can't see anymore. So between shortened lifespans and detection bias, this mystery is shrinking fast. But wait, even accounting for both of those factors, doesn't modern lifestyle still play some genuine role? Asterisk, but wait, surely environmental and lifestyle factors in the modern world have to be part of this story too, right? They almost certainly are, and researchers take this seriously. Modern risk factors, tobacco use, specific industrial and environmental carcinogens, processed food consumption, reduced physical activity, and obesity are well-documented contributors to elevated cancer rates in contemporary populations, according to extensive epidemiological research from organizations including the World Health Organization. So this isn't really an either-or situation. It's closer to three separate factors stacking on top of each other. Ancient people mostly didn't live long enough to develop most cancers. The ones that did occur are hugely underrepresented in what actually survives in bone, and on top of all that, certain modern environmental and lifestyle factors genuinely have increased risk for specific cancer types compared to ancient conditions. None of those three explanations cancel each other out. They're all true simultaneously, each contributing a different sized piece to the same overall picture. And that's really the thread connecting this entire mystery. A body that never reaches 60 does not get the chance to develop what mostly strikes after 60. A cancer that never touches bone does not leave behind anything for an archaeologist to ever find. A modern body, living decades longer, surrounded by entirely new chemical and environmental exposures, faces risks no ancient skeleton ever had the years or the world to encounter. The bones were never lying to us. They were just never capable of showing us the whole story in the first place. That's the real answer hiding underneath the initial mystery. It was never really ancient humans didn't get cancer. It's closer to ancient evidence of cancer was always going to be incomplete, for reasons that have almost nothing to do with cancer itself. So what about the exceptions? Because surely some ancient cancer cases have actually been confirmed and studied in detail. Yes, and these cases are genuinely valuable precisely because they're rare. One well-documented example is a roughly 1.7 million-year-old fossilized toe bone from South Africa, examined in a 2016 study published in the South African Journal of Science, which researchers identified as showing osteosarcoma, a form of bone cancer, among the oldest confirmed cancer diagnoses in the hominin fossil record. Cases like this confirm cancer isn't purely a modern invention. It existed deep in our evolutionary past. They're simply exceptionally rare finds, both because cancer that reaches bone is uncommon to begin with, and because a fossil or skeleton has to survive in exactly the right condition for potentially millions of years for anyone to ever find it and correctly identify what happened, which reframes the entire question one more time. These rare cases aren't inconvenient exceptions to the theory. They're proof the disease was always there, just almost never in a position to leave evidence anyone could actually recover. So back to that instinct you probably started with, the sense that cancer feels like something distinctly modern. That instinct wasn't entirely wrong, and it wasn't entirely right either. Modern life genuinely has introduced new risk factors that matter. But modern life has also done something equally important, something easy to overlook. It's given people the extra decades of life that cancer typically needs in order to develop in the first place. We're not necessarily living in a world that causes more cancer out of nowhere. In a lot of ways, we're living in the first era where most people actually survive long enough to find out. Ancient bones were never cancer-free. They just rarely lived long enough to prove otherwise.